Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into less doing, more living today.
Ooh, good one. I like that.
Right. This book really spoke to me, and I think it will to you guys too. It's by Ari Meisel. He's all about, well, doing less, but getting more out of life.
Which, let's be honest, is something we could all use a little help with these days.
100%. And the best part is his whole approach came about from a really personal place, his own struggle with Crohn's disease.
It's amazing how these sorts of challenges can lead to such incredible insights, right?
Absolutely. So before we unpack all the juicy details of how to actually do less, we've got to talk about this Crohn's experience a bit. Because it's not just a backstory, it really sets the stage for everything else in the book. Has either of you ever felt that pressure, to do it all, be it all, like you're constantly switched on, plugged in, and just completely overloaded?
Oh, 100%. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, even without a chronic illness. Modern life just kind of throws everything at you at once. It's easy to feel completely overwhelmed.
Right. And that's where Meisel's experience comes in. Because even though it comes from dealing with a serious illness, what he realized is actually relevant to everyone. We have this limited amount of time and energy, and we need to be smarter about how we use it. It's not about laziness. It's about being intentional.
Exactly. It's about figuring out what truly matters most and focusing your energy on that instead of trying to do everything at once.
Which, spoiler alert, never actually works.
Never. You end up spread so thin that you're not really giving anything your all.
Right. So to help us figure that out, Meisel gives us these 9 principles. He calls them his toolkit for less doing. And trust me, this toolkit is packed.
It really is. And I think that's one of the things that makes this book so helpful. It's not just a bunch of vague ideas. He gives you these very practical strategies that you can actually use.
Totally. So should we dive into principle number 1?
Let's do it.
All right, so principle number 1 is limit your tasks. Now, this might seem obvious on the surface.
Right. Like, don't we all want to do less?
Exactly. But there's a real art to it, and Meisel breaks it down in a way that I found really helpful. It's not just about doing less. It's about strategically choosing what not to do. He talks about this thing called the 80-20 rule. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah. It's the idea that like 20% of what you do actually leads to 80% of your results.
Exactly. So the key is to figure out what that crucial 20% is and ruthlessly eliminate or delegate the rest.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah.
I know I can be a bit of a workaholic myself, so figuring out what to let go of is always a challenge.
Well, Meisel has this really interesting exercise in the book that might help with that. Are you ready for this?
Get me with it.
Okay, so imagine you have a heart attack. Don't worry, you're fine. It's just a thought experiment.
Okay. You had me worried for a second there.
I know. A little intense, but stay with me. So you have this heart attack. What tasks would you absolutely have to do, and what would just fall by the wayside?
Wow. Okay, when you put it like that. I guess it really puts things into perspective pretty quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah, seeing how that would be effective.
It's a slightly morbid way to get to the heart of what truly matters, but it's surprisingly powerful.
And then once you've figured out those essential tasks, that's where the magic of automation comes in, which is another one of Meisel's big things.
Yes. Automation. Now, this is where things start to get really fun, in my opinion, because Meisel takes automation to a whole new level. We're not just talking about automating your email here. We're talking about automating your life.
It's like having a personal assistant working behind the scenes 24/7, taking care of all those little things that suck up your time and energy.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm already sold, but for those listening who might be thinking, hold on, automation sounds complicated, how does Meisel suggest we actually put this into practice?
It's actually easier than you might think.
Really?
Yeah, Meisel is all about keeping things simple and user-friendly. He talks a lot about these tools like IFTTT and Zapier. Have you heard of those?
Oh, yeah, I use those all the time. They're lifesavers once you get the hang of them.
Right. And the beauty of them is that they let you connect all these different apps and automate tasks across different platforms.
It's like having your own little tech support team working behind the scenes.
Totally. Like you can set it up so that, say, every time you get a new email in your work inbox, it automatically creates a task in your to-do list app.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or you can have it so that when you add a new contact to your phone, it automatically adds them to your CRM or something.
See, this is what I'm talking about. These little automations, they seem small, but they add up to huge time savings in the long run.
100%. It's all about freeing up your mental bandwidth for the things that really matter.
Okay, so automation, I'm on board. But I gotta be honest with you, delegation, that's my Achilles heel.
Really? How come?
I don't know. I think I have this control freak thing going on. I always feel like if I want something done right, I have to do it myself.
I can relate to that. I think that's
Wow.
something a lot of us struggle with. But Meisel actually addresses that head on in the book, and he has some really good advice for how to overcome that fear of letting go.
Ooh, lay it on me.
Well, first of all, he talks about how delegation isn't really about relinquishing control. It's more about leveraging the strengths of others. It's about recognizing that you don't have to do everything yourself, and that it's actually more effective to build a team and work together towards a shared goal.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Exactly. And Meisel suggests starting small. Like, don't try to delegate everything at once.
Yeah, that would be overwhelming.
Right. Instead, he says, identify one low-stakes task that you feel comfortable handing off to someone else. Something that, even if it doesn't go perfectly, it's not the end of the world.
Okay, that makes sense. Start small, build trust, and go from there.
Exactly. And he talks about how important it is to be really clear about your expectations when you delegate something. Like, don't just assume that the other person knows exactly what you're thinking.
Oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of that.
It's so easy to do. But taking the time to clearly communicate what you need, by when, and what success looks like can make all the difference.
That's such good advice. I feel like I need to write that down.
Right. It's all about setting everyone up for success.
Okay, so we've talked about limiting tasks, automating, delegating. What's next on Meisel's less doing hit list?
Well, this next one is all about how we manage our time and energy throughout the day. And it's called time blocking.
Ooh, time blocking. Now, this is something I've tried before with varying degrees of success.
What's your experience been like with it?
Honestly, I think I self-sabotage because I get so excited. I try to block out every single minute of my day.
Oh, I've totally been there.
And then life happens, things come up and my whole schedule gets thrown off.
I think that happens to everyone. The key is to not get too caught up in being perfectly rigid with your schedule.
That's good to know. So for those who haven't tried it, remind us again how time blocking works.
Sure. So basically, it's about taking your day and dividing it into chunks of time, each dedicated to a specific task or activity.
So instead of just having this long to-do list and trying to squeeze things in whenever you can, you're proactively deciding what you're going to work on when.
Exactly. And the key to making it really effective is to align those time blocks with your natural energy levels throughout the day.
Oh, that's a good point. Meisel talks about that, right? Finding those peak energy times.
He does. He's a big believer in understanding your own personal rhythms and working with them, not against them.
Which makes total sense. Like, I'm definitely a morning person. If I have a big, important task that requires a lot of focus, I know better than to try and tackle it at 4 p.m. when I'm basically already checked out for the day.
Exactly. But if you try to power through and work on something that requires a lot of focus when your energy is low, you're just setting yourself up for frustration.
Preach. I feel seen.
It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Okay, so we've got our time blocks figured out. What do we actually fill them with?
Well, that's where another one of Meisel's principles comes in, and it's called batch processing.
Ah, batch processing. This one's a tongue twister.
Right. It basically means grouping similar tasks together and doing them all at once, instead of scattering them throughout the day.
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure. So instead of constantly checking your email throughout the day, you might designate 2 or 3 specific time blocks to go through your inbox and respond to everything all at once.
Oh, that's so smart, because every time you switch tasks, it takes your brain a minute to catch up, right?
Exactly. Context switching is a huge productivity killer, and batch processing helps you avoid that.
Game changer.
And it can apply to so many different areas of your life, too. Like maybe you batch all your errands together on one day of the week,
Ooh, yeah, instead of making multiple trips to the store.
or you batch all your cooking for the week on Sunday afternoon.
Meal prepping, I love that.
It's all about finding ways to streamline your workflow and minimize those little transitions that eat up your time and energy.
I am here for it. Okay, so we're really starting to build this toolkit now. We've got limiting tasks, automation, delegation, time blocking, batch processing. What else?
There's more, and this next one is all about taking care of yourself.
Okay, bring it on. Self-care is important, but it's usually the first thing to go when I'm feeling overwhelmed.
I hear that. But Meisel would argue that it's actually the most important time to prioritize it.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about indulging in a little bubble bath every now and then?
Not exactly, although bubble baths are great, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But he's talking about something more fundamental.
Like what?
Well, he sees rest and recovery as essential for maintaining the energy and focus we need to actually implement all these other principles effectively.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about being good to ourselves. It's about being strategic.
Exactly. He's basically saying that if you're constantly running on fumes, you're not going to be able to do your best work anyway.
Makes sense. Any practical tips on how to actually make this happen?
Yeah,
Because, easier said than done.
totally. He talks a lot about the importance of designing morning and evening routines that set you up for success. He even shares his own in the book, which I thought was interesting.
Ooh, I'm always curious about other people's routines. What kind of things does he do?
Well, in the mornings, he's all about starting the day with intention. So that might look like meditation, journaling, or even just taking a few minutes to sit quietly and gather your thoughts.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that. Even just 5 minutes of stretching before I check my phone makes a difference.
Right. It's about creating those little pockets of mindfulness throughout the day. And the same goes for your evening routine. He's big on winding down consciously, like signaling to your mind and body that it's time to transition into rest mode.
So, no more scrolling through social media in bed.
You probably wouldn't recommend it. He talks about setting a digital curfew, dimming the lights, maybe reading a book or taking a bath. It's about actively disconnecting from the day's stimulation.
Okay, that's good advice. I am so guilty of burning the midnight oil, then wondering why I can't sleep.
It's so easy to fall into that trap. Which brings us to Meisel's final principle, and I think it's a perfect way to wrap everything up.
Okay, what is it?
Pursue what you love.
Oh, I like that. It's like he's saying all this optimization, all this efficiency. It's not just about squeezing every last drop out of life. It's about making space for the things that really light us up.
Exactly. He wants us to use these principles as tools to create more space in our lives for joy, purpose, and fulfillment. It's about designing a life that reflects our values.
This has been awesome. So many good takeaways. What's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from less doing, more living? If they could just take one thing and actually implement it today, what would it be?
That's a great question.
Uh,
I'd say ask yourself this: what's one task I could automate or delegate right now to free up more time and energy for something that truly matters to me?
It's such a good question because it's not about doing nothing. It's about being intentional about what we choose to do and how we choose to spend our precious time and energy. And on that note, this has been our deep dive into Less Doing, More Living by Ari Meisel. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.